Hi everyone. So as we are coming very close to the NEET exam, and almost just a day is left before the NEET exam, many students had requested me to take up the issues regarding exam stress, anxiety, and a lot of uncertainty, which is generally very common phenomena just before the exam. So for the common benefit of everyone, we will address few issues which are almost universal, I would say, and almost all students go through this phase just before the exam. So first we need to understand what is the reason for this exam anxiety. The main reason for this exam anxiety is the uncertainty. The uncertainty lies irrespective of your hard work, irrespective of how much time you have spent preparing, irrespective of your resource. So first thing which people need to understand that uncertainty about the outcome of any entrance exam or anything for the matter of life is true for everyone and it's universal. So first you need to embrace this very fact that irrespective of how much hard work you have put in, there's always some amount of uncertainty that what is going to be the final outcome. Now, the hard work you have put in or the efforts you have made increase the probability and decreases the percentage of this uncertainty. But yet, whatever may be said and done, this uncertainty, maybe for someone it might be 10%, for someone will be 20%, someone will be 50%, but there will be some element of uncertainty and there's some element of probability of doing well. Now, this uncertainty, when we do not embrace this fact that there is uncertainty, it leads to what is anxiety. Now, anxiety is actually when you start focusing on things you do not control and you forget what you control. So, here's an illustration if you can see. So, we all have lots of doubts, self doubts, doubts regarding our preparation, doubts regarding what will be happen if things don't go according to plan. And these are all the question marks which exist in our head. So as you can clearly see this image, series of question marks, but there is a very small pathway through these question marks which leads you to a clarity world. So our focus is not these question marks. Our focus is that pathway of clarity which is necessary to achieve what is required. And when people start focusing on these question marks, they start developing what is called as the panic. And the panic is nothing but it is like a spiral. It is like a negative spiral which takes you down. So many students, just 1 or 2 days before the exam, actually have a panic attack. Many people generally advise, and we used to tell students also that you should not panic. You should not panic. Do not panic. But over time, saying this again and again that you should not panic doesn't make it a realistic advice. So my target of today's video is being realistic rather than just being optimistic. So optimism doesn't figure out in the real life. What you need to focus on is if things go south, how do you manage it? So if I say that don't panic, that's not going to work for most of you. So here we are going to discuss how do you manage if you panic? How do you manage if you have anxiety? Because I'm sure a lot of you are going to have anxiety. I think so almost everyone, irrespective of the GT score you have, is going to have anxiety. And some fraction of you are going to panic. So, the focus for today's talk is that to understand where your anxiety stems from, which is your uncertainty, and how does it leads to panic. And if you have anxiety and you have panic, how do you manage both? So, there's a cognitive bias. There's a cognitive bias, and it's not just one bias, there's a series of bias which exist in all of your heads. So we're going to address each bias which exists in your head. And I feel this talk is going to be different from most people's talk because it's not going to be a motivational talk. It's going to be a reality check. And all these bias are from the DMs I have received, the messages I have received over years. So the first bias is, which is going to be universal irrespective of your GT score, is I am going to fail terribly in this exam, irrespective of my level of preparation. And all these bias are common. The person who has a GT score of 80 or 100 also faces this. A person who has a score of 170 also faces this. So if you feel that you're going to fail terribly in this exam, the second thing is people tend to feel I have forgotten everything. So to the first bias, okay, that you are going to fail terribly in this exam. First of all, the exam hasn't happened yet. Number one, this is an assumption. The result isn't out yet. So that's a speculation. So your presumption or assumption that you are going to fail terribly in this exam is as hypothetical as a hallucination. So we as human beings tend to have negative hallucination before stressful periods. So when you're going to feel again and again that I'm going to fail terribly in this exam, that is actually you hoping that you don't. It is just like a negative response expecting a positive outcome. What's happened is that people have this myth that if they think that something bad is going to happen, in the subconscious, they're constantly wishing that something good should happen. So when a student says, I'm going to fail terribly in this exam, this is a conscious way of overcoming a subconscious desire to actually do very well in exam. So this is his way of actually saying, I wish I do really well in the exam. But when it passes from your subconscious to your conscious mind, because you know the uncertainty translates that actual statement into that probably you're going to terribly fail in this exam. So it's the uncertainty which acts as a catalyst. At your subconscious level, no one wants to terribly fail in the exam. And if at subconscious you are actually designed to win and achieve in life and feel positive about life and your life goals, why would someone actually think consistently that I'm going to fail in this exam? So this what you need to understand. There's a cognitive bias superimposed by the uncertainty of the exam, where you actually want to do very well in the exam, and that is what you're actually wishing for your own self. But when it passes through your cognitive bias of uncertainty, it comes out to you consistently that you're going to fail terribly in this exam. So actually, you should stop this cognitive bias and remind yourself that actually your desire is not to fail in the exam. This you are just saying, probably because of the evidence you think exists around you. But actually, at the subconscious level, what you want to do is you want to do really well in the exam. The second bias, which is I've forgotten everything. Now, that is also, it is just like simultagnosia. You're missing the forest for the tree, okay? And one thing you forget, one MCQ you remember, one thing your friend tells up, you have forgotten. It's perfectly okay. Everyone forgets something. So there's a cognitive bias that just because you couldn't remember two things, you tend to paint the entire picture in the same color. That yes, I have forgotten everything. This is students used to write me, sir, sab bhul raha hai. So I should tell you, sabko sab bhul raha hai. Because that's how you paint the picture. You take one color, you stroke your entire picture and landscape like that. So stop doing it. So that is a pure bias. Yes, that's true that you might have forgotten one or two things, or you might be weak at two or three subjects. But let me ask you, what is the probability that that is going to come in the exam? You yourself don't know. But yet your assumption that if you have forgotten few things, you have forgotten everything. So you need to understand that because you are uncertain about what is going to come in exam, you have developed a cognitive bias that actually you have forgotten everything when you have just forgotten few things which might or might not come actually in the exam. And even if you feel they might come in the exam, now you have understood that you have forgotten it. So rather than cribbing about it, you can always get to revising them. And if you feel that this is not universal, everyone forgets something, but not everyone is going to forget everything. So this is a pure cognitive bias which students tend to keep repeating themselves. And that is what human nature is. What you tend to speak more about starts happening to you. So when you keep on telling yourself I have forgotten everything. You start feeling at the subconscious level that yes, you have forgotten everything, when that is not true. You might have forgotten something, but since you have worked hard, this exam is not a viva, it's not a theory exam. Even if you have forgotten something, there's a very high chance that when you see the options, you see the questions, see the image in the exam or the question stem or one of the few options you have eliminated, it's going to click. Why don't you think like that? So it's a pure cognitive bias. I have forgotten everything when you've forgotten just some things. And actually, they might not come in the exam, or you might recall them after seeing the options. It's not a viva, it's not a theory exam. Okay. So this needs to change. The third bias, everyone is better prepared than me. And trust me, if 2 lakh people are going to give it the exam, I think so. None of them thinks that he or she is best prepared. They always think that someone is better prepared than them. The statement that everyone is better prepared than me is wrong. That is the bias. Yes, some will be better prepared than you, but there's a decent chunk which is going to be less prepared than you. So, how do you, just because you feel that one or two people you know they are better prepared than you, why do you paint the entire picture blue by saying everyone is better prepared than you? Because NEET exam doesn't have just 2 seats. So that you think it will go to those people who you know who are better prepared than you. It has so many seats. So you should focus on your seat and stop assuming that everyone is better prepared than you are, because that's actually not the truth. That's just a bias. And actually, there will always be someone who's better prepared than you, and there will always be someone who is worse prepared than you. But that is not going to translate into the actual range, even. So, considering that everyone is better prepared than me is nothing but a hypothetical bias. The next thing, if you may make one mistake, I will mess up everything. We all make mistakes. Okay. Just be smart. Don't make silly mistakes. Make calculated errors. If you're smart, make calculated planned errors so that you own up your mistakes. And if one mistake goes, if one thing goes wrong, doesn't mean all remaining 190 questions go wrong. Okay. Something will go wrong. Like you're going to score 100% the exam. You're not going to happen that. So if you make one mistake, not everything is going to mess up. Everyone is going to make a mistake. You are just making one of the few mistakes. And you should always remember that if you want to get a good rank, let us suppose in any exam, if you score 160 correct, that's a good score. Okay. So you have 40 questions to lose. So why you are just worried about one mistake and then you assume that just because you will make one mistake or you have already made one mistake in a particular GT or one recall, you are going to mess up everything. You already have a leverage of doing almost 40 questions wrong. Why can't you explain it to yourself? The next, on last days, there comes this FOMO where you feel your friends are settled and you are the only one left behind. Trust me, medicine is a very long journey. Even if one of your colleague or friend has joined residency, he's just being a first year JR. Okay, he's not there out there changing the world. And trust me, your preparation phase is much less harsher than your residency is. So he's not probably enjoying and doing it. He's just doing the scut work in residency. And then your definition of being settled in medicine is pretty skewed because it takes years to settle in medicine. So when you say your friends are settled, it's just that they are past that toll gate and you are in queue for that toll gate. Nothing else. It's not they have reached the ultimate destination. So again, a cognitive bias which you have created at the subconscious level. And then with the uncertainty at the conscious level, you are mixing it up and just giving yourself a cocktail where you just keep on saying your sad stories that my friends are settled and I'm left behind. No one is left behind. Everyone is taking life at their own pace. Just because someone has started a residency 6 months before you have or 1 year before you have doesn't mean in the long term that guy is going to be more successful than you are or that girl is going to be more successful than you are. That is just an assumption because to be successful in medicine in long term, there's so many things which play a role. And trust me, your rank in the entrance is one of the least contributing factors to that. So when you feel your friends are settled, just tell yourself you are in the process of getting settling. if that helps you. Now, if I feel anxious, I'll forget everything in the exam. Now, this is something which is very, very tricky as a bias. What happens is, first students feel anxious. Then they start feeling anxious about being anxious. And then they start assuming that if this anxiety crops up in the exam, they start becoming anxious about that also. So it's a vicious cycle. It needs to stop somewhere. And it is pure overthinking. So where do you stop here? You just being stop anxious in the current moment. So if you are not anxious in the current moment and stop thinking that what will happen if you are anxious in the exam, and why there is so much bias that I will forget everything in the exam. Why people don't understand that it's an MCQ exam which will involve more of presence of mind and elimination, and the options are going to be in front of you. It's not going to be a viva, right? Because it's not going to be a viva, no one is going to ask for an answer up front. You have to be in that moment and look at the options, look at the images, look at the question stem, and think what is the possible diagnosis or how to solve this problem or what subject it belongs to. So when you feel that feel anxious and I will forget everything in exam, just hold your nerve in the present moment and stop worrying about whether you will be anxious 2 days later or not. Because this anxiety is like a negative spiral infinity loop. It's never gonna stop. It's not gonna stop in the present moment. So the best thing to that is you stop feeling anxious in the present moment and stop worrying whether you'll be anxious 2 days later or not. Because holding the nerve in the present moment is more important than having a false assumption about future. So it's a huge amount of cognitive bias that I feel anxious and I'll forget everything in the exam. Because exam is not about recall. The exam is about presence of mind. It's not about bringing it back from your pensive or from your long-term memory and putting it there. Actually, when you're going to work in exam, you're going to be so heightened state of stress and anxiety that most of the things you're going to answer is going to be on spinal level or from your working memory, which is you're controlled by your prefrontal cortex, which is the executive function, rather than from hippocampus. So stop worrying about whether you'll forget everything because this exam is not about remembering things. This exam is about reading the paper well, answering the questions in the smart way, choosing easier questions, and being fully in the game. It's not about remembering things. Now, the next bias, the ghost of the Christmas past. What happened in last NEET or INI is going to repeat itself. It is all up to you. So, something might have gone wrong in the last exam. Okay. I accept that. Okay. But that is what we have to make an effort that whatever was an avoidable mishap in the last NEET or INI, and probably like you getting blanked out, you having a panic attack, you having anxiety, your entire focus should that it should not happen. So rather than keep on asking yourself what will happen if it is repeat of the last NEET or INI, you should tell yourself, I will make sure that I don't mess up like I messed up in INI-CT. Why can't you talk to yourself in this way? See, restructuring your brain and restructuring your emotions and having a control over them is just about what you choose to say to yourself. So you can just say to yourself that what if something like what happened in last INST is going to repeat this time? Rather than saying this to yourself, you just tell yourself, whatever may happen, whatever questions I don't know, I'm just going to make sure that I don't mess up like I freaked out in last INICT. That's the only target I have. If you keep telling yourself this, then things will go according to plan. Hmm. The next thing is, what will my parents and friends think if I don't do it? Trust me, in this world, after one stage, you will understand that people have judgment and opinions for very short terms. Actually, in long term, no one cares because after all, it's your life. So, you cannot be clouded by a future judgment of people close to you about what you could achieve and what you didn't. If things don't go according to plan, eventually it's you who's gonna figure it out. Okay, it's you who have to hustle. Neither your parents nor your friends. They can feel sad for you, they can be there for you, they can support you. But after some time, everyone gets exhausted. That's the ugly truth of life. And once they get exhausted, they're going to say you can take up any seat and you just move forward. Because we are also tired of this. So why you are so worried what they will think about it? Because after all, it's you who's going to have to sort it. So why worry about the judgment of people when the judgment eventually is not going to help you do better? And the world generally has a tendency to say, हमने तो बोला ही था. Whether you win, whether you lose, the point is going to be the same. So trust me, what will happen? What will your parents and your friends say if you don't do well? They're going to say something. But still, those sayings are not going to change your future. It's your hustle which is going to change your future. So whatever they're going to say, whether you win or you lose, is going to be immaterial. Because you will have to make your way irrespective whether they say good or they say bad. So this is a pure cognitive bias. The last and the most important, is my preparation enough? So this is not a bias. And I'm going to tell you on your face, no one's preparation is ever enough. And get this straight in your head. You prepare for 10 years, you prepare for 5 years, you prepare for 6 months. You will always find something which is left behind. So stop asking your question, is my preparation enough? Doesn't matter. Who cares? And how is going to determine whether your preparation is enough or not? We still want to get the best out of what we have. So this question is totally redundant. And the answer to this is going to be no. Irrespective, you have finished all resources available today, all apps available, all content available. Still, is your good preparation going to be enough? No, because after all, you're a human being. How much you can remember? You will make mistakes. So, irrespective how well you think your preparation is, it is never going to be enough. And even if someone is getting a GT score of 180 right now, do you think his or her preparation is enough? No, it's never gonna be. So it's not about the preparation being enough. It's whether you can replicate your preparation in a real life scenario. That is what is important. So please give yourself enough time. Some of you might have all these cognitive biases. Some of you might have just one of them. Talk to yourself and talk to yourself the way I have talked to you. All this exists in your head. It is all hypothetical, doesn't exist in the real world. You are just hallucinating. So you just need to tell your own self that all these are biases. And that is where comes the role of cognitive restructuring. So whatever points I have told you against each bias you have is what is a scientific technique of cognitive restructuring. So all of you before this exam, on the last day, give yourself half an hour, 1 hour, talk to yourself and restructure yourself cognitively, because that's going to improve your rank. That's going to make a difference. That's going to get you the mindset you need for the exam. Last day, last minute preparation, last minute panic is going to happen. You need to rewire your cognition and your thought process point by point, eliminating each bias and restructuring it into a positive outlook. That is what is needed. And that is what is the theme of this. How to solve your uncertainty, the anxiety, and the panic, which leads to it, is by cognitive restructuring of your cognitive biases. And once you have restructured this on the last day, the problem is going to happen 30 minutes just before you start your exam. And it's going to happen with all of you. So, one day before, how to restructure that I've told. Now, what's going to be the problem? You're going to freak out 30 minutes just before the start of your exam when you're sitting in front of your computer. So, here are some points, and I want all of you to follow this diligently. Like it's like a gospel truth, like it is like a secret mantra. You have to follow each and every one point by point just before your exam and make sure you execute it to perfection. The first thing, you have to read your exam, not to scroll, not to glance. And this is very important. It might appear as a very stupid or a very simple thing, but it is simple things and the redundant things in life which make all the difference. So, what people have a tendency is they don't read their exam well. Either they scroll through their exam or they glance through the exam. So, that's where the role comes of a cursor or a finger. So that if you're reading any question from a distance, your focus per unit alphabet is going to be lesser. To increase that focus and your reading speed, which is going to increase your time management and improve the time you have at your disposal, you should read using your finger or cursor the first alphabet of the question stem to the last alphabet of the option. And trust me, if you'll follow it diligently from question number 1 to question number 200 in your exam, it's going to increase your time speed. And trust me, if using the cursor method, you are not able to understand a particular question in your second read, then skip that question because this means you have no clue how to solve it. Okay. The next is going to be the recall bias. All of you have a wrong mentality thinking that you will be able to retrieve answers from your long term memory in your exam. No. And generally, what happens is that you have flickers of some related questions, and there you tend to do questions wrong. Sometimes you see a question in exam and you feel that you have seen something similar, and probably the answer to that was this. And without even reading the question, without reading the options, you just mark the answer based on a recall bias of some PYQ or some PYT or some question which you might have read and might look similar. There comes the problem. You have to understand that you don't have to have a recall bias. You need to understand that you need to read each question stem, each option, and eliminate and then answer rather than answering it on the basis, हाँ शायद मैंने ऐसा कभी कहीं कुछ देखा था. No, that doesn't help. फिर कुछ और ही मार्क हो जाएगा किसी और क्वेश्चन का. और बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स इस रिकॉल बायस पे आंसर करते हैं कि शायद ऐसा कुछ देखा था. नो, दैट्स नॉट राइट. And that's why they tend to do questions wrong. That's why there comes a PYQ bias. Even if you've done PYQs well, good, very good, but you don't have to focus and try to bring it from your old memory. Focus on the question in front of you, the options in front of you, and eliminate them. The next is any long question, which is a long stem, is huge, is deterring. So for any question which is a long stem, you have to make sure that you read the options and the image first, and then you go back to the question stem, because that is going to increase your speed. That is going to make you focus and narrow down on options first and understand which subject it belongs to and what exactly is expected out of the answer, and then go back to the question stem. Now, how to much attempt to keep? My personal opinion, if you have a chance of eliminating two options and you're confused between two options, I will still go for the attempt. Unless and until you don't know at least two options, that's the only way you have to leave the question. So if you can answer, figure out it's at least between this 50% probability of getting the thing right. Okay, fine. You go for the answer. And I would advocate that considering the competition which exists in the country, we expect that you should give at least more than 180 questions to be attempted in the total exam out of 200, because that gives you a chance of a realistic rank, being very honest. So beyond 180, I feel that is more of how much you are confident in attempting and saving the negative bite. Now, many students complain that I'm going to zone out in the exam. So if you zone out in the exam and you are just totally lost, reverse count from 20. It will work. Okay. Hold your chair strongly, reverse count from 20 and exhale out. So there are different ways of boxing techniques of breathing, and this is one of them. When you do reverse counting from 20, it helps you to break your negative thought, control a panic attack, and bring you back from being zoned out. Now, the first slot tsunami. Now, this is a disclaimer. There is going to be a tsunami. There's going to be a wave of questions which are going to hit you hard very, very badly. So, my question to you all, how bad is too bad? I don't know. Maybe first 20 questions you don't know at all. First 10 questions you don't know at all. The entire first slot might happen that first slot you don't know at all. So I am considering that the first NEET slot is going to be like a tsunami. Every wave is gonna come, hit you badly, go back. Another wave is gonna come, hit you badly, go back. But you have to be that rock which sticks. Which the exam is not about just about the first slot. It's about bracing the impact of the first slot. And I'm gonna tell you, and this you have to tell yourself each point which I've written. You have to tell each point to yourself 30 minutes before the start of your exam. You're gonna assume that the first slot is gonna hit you badly, very, very badly. And how bad is too bad? We don't know. Maybe the entire slot is gonna hit you badly, but still, you have to hold your nerve, hold it like a rock, brace the impact, because the slot 2, 3, 4 is going to be better. And that is going to be the test. People who will pass through the impact of the first slot, they're going to do better. So I am telling you this trick right now. Embrace the impact, brace it, stick to it, move forward, attempt slot 2, 3, 4, and 5 in a confident manner. That's the trick. Okay, the first slot is going to be like a tsunami, and you assume it's going to be bad. Maybe it's going to be the worst GT of your life. But we brace the impact, we move forward, we find easy questions and do them correct. After all, the target is to do 160 to 170 questions correct, which are easy, not the difficult ones. Then there's a bias of simplicity versus complexity. Now, what happens is that students tend to have a bias that ये क्वेश्चन इतना आसान नहीं हो सकता, चीजें इतनी सिंपल नहीं हो सकती. Don't ever change your answers like this कि ये इतना आसान नहीं हो सकता. You change your answers based on your instinct, or you based it on your elimination. You don't change your answers based on thinking, can it be that simple? Because trust me, when people prepare the exam, they're not always trying to prepare the most difficult exam for you. So sometimes the things are very simple and you tend to make it very complex, creating hypothetical concepts, being the Einstein exactly on the day of your exam. But in most situations, the questions are simple. It's right in the front of your eyes. So please, in the exam, don't do this. Choose simplicity over complexity. Then overthinking. Overthinking is the biggest problem. And that is where the role of instinct comes over intellectualization. Sometimes we tend to overthink. We tend to give importance to buzzwords which should not be given. So, my personal preference is, if your instinct says that it is this, then you go for your instinct. And if you have marked a question with your instinct and you have marked it for review, don't change it. Don't change it. This thing has to be very, very clear. Many students, if they're left with enough time before the exam, let us suppose you are saved 30 minutes in your last slot, people tend to go and revise each and every question, even if that is green and that's not marked for review. That is pure stupidity. You should go and relook at questions which are marked for review, not every question, number one. And when you are relooking at a question which are marked for review, you should choose your instinct over hypothetical intellectualization, because that is what I believe. A human instinct at subconscious level generally is better. So don't overthink and keep on changing your answers when you are reviewing your questions marked for review, because that's where 70% of people mess up. They tend to change the answers at the last moment, overthinking, going against their instinct, and there comes a problem. The next is going to be ego battle. Trust me, a lot of you have this ego issues. You feel pride in saying that I have seen so many students coming and told me, sir, when I gave the GT, I could do all those questions correct, which even the topper was not able to do correct. But I did some silly mistake which everyone was doing. What is this ego battle? You should not be proud of this. The exam is not about doing difficult questions correct. And we are not here to prove that our understanding or concepts are better than someone who's topping the exam. It might make you feel proud, it might boost your ego, but it does not have any realism. So trust me, get over this ego battle. If you feel something is out of your league, you skip it. We are not here to prove a point that I am good at a particular subject or I can solve this question. No. The exam is about finding the easy questions and doing them correct. Because an easy question, a difficult question, and something which is going to touch your ego has equal relevance as compared to someone you're going to let pass. So be smart. Don't be stupid. Don't let your ego blind you in the exam. That I have to do this question correct because I like this subject. No. Let us suppose you are very good at biochemistry and there's some question where you are not able to answer that question in biochemistry. Don't take it on your ego. Just because I'm good at biochemistry, I have to make sure that every question in biochemistry is correct. No, be smart. You might be able to do a question of path correct very easily because that was a very simple question. So don't get blinded by your ego and just by your likeness of a particular subject. Exam is not about your likeness. Exam is not about solving difficult questions. Exam is about smart choices, easy questions. Then timestamp. This rule is very, very important. For each slot, let us suppose each slot is of 42 minutes, 40 questions. You have to make sure that from the slot 1, at the 20th minute, you are somewhere around the 25th question, because this tracking is very, very important. And the first slot is going to be the biggest problem, that your speed is going to be slower because you're going to spend more time reading the questions, overthinking, being overcautious. So it's very important that in the mid slot, you should have a checkpoint where you should look at the time and you should understand that how many questions you are lagging. So around the 20th minute, you should be somewhere around the 23rd, 24th, 25th question. That is a good range, 23rd to 25th question. So this timestamp rule of 25 by 20 is very, very important, because that will able to handle, that will provide you the enough bandwidth to reach to the last question and answer it correctly. And last but not the least, the fox and the grapes. You remember that childhood story? There was a fox that was trying to look at the grapes and couldn't reach it, then rationalized, okay, probably the grapes are sour. So I'm going to tell you a trick. In real exam, this works. Let us suppose if you feel that there are series of questions which you don't know, in the exam you will have to create an artificial cognitive bias and tell yourself, if I don't know it, no one else knows it. Trust me, if I don't know it, then no one else is going to know it. So you have to keep on telling yourself this in the exam, कि अंगूर खट्टे हैं, अगर अंगूर मुझे नहीं मिले तो अंगूर खट्टे हैं. And it works. Trust me, it works. For questions you are not able to get through, just tell yourself, if I am not able to understand, I think so others won't also. Let's move forward. So first part of the video, I told you not to have a cognitive bias, but at the end, I'll tell you to introduce another cognitive bias artificially right in your exam, because that's going to help you. So I think so I have covered lots and lots of things about cognitive restructuring and how do you handle just 30 minutes before your exam. But please, all this is going to change how you perform in the exam. Whatever I have told you is not hypothetical, it has scientific basis, it's practical, and it is realism. It's not just blind motivation. Thank you and all the best. Bye.